Okay, this video is a correction of some of the things that I said in the Psalm 90 videos playlists, principally with respect to meter in some of the verses. The total meter is still the same, the total paragraphs are still the same, but some of the clauses I had to correct as a result of finding out that Paul is actually using the Psalm 90 meter. And by watching how he did it, I was able to find my errors. Okay, now there might be more errors, but I know that the total paragraphs are still right. If you see any, let me know. What I'm going to do here is I have now retranslated Psalm 90 into English with the same meter as is in the Hebrew, so you can see the impact of it. It will be easier to understand and follow what Paul does in Ephesians 1:3 through 14, which is in my episode 10 of the GGS playlist. It'll be easier to follow if you see Psalm 90 done with the Hebrew meter, and I also had promised to do that a year ago. And also Psalm 90 will be easier to follow if translated with its own Hebrew meter in English compared to Isaiah 53, which I translated last year, or no, earlier this year, earlier in 2010 that is. I retranslated Isaiah 53 using its own Hebrew meter into English. That way you can get a better sense of how the Jews who heard it in Hebrew felt about it, what it meant to them to see that meter. It's really important because this key doctrine about how God orchestrates time is not only communicated in the regular manner in Bible verses, but it's also communicated with meter, because the whole idea was for Israel to keep on being reminded in every which way possible about what time it was. Because Israel was on a schedule. They knew when Messiah was going to come. They didn't know some of the details. The details were gradually revealed to them, but they did know the end point from the beginning. That was the test for them. Is hi, this deadline is coming up. I keep on telling you about it. Are you going to do what I tell you, or are you going to be on the wrong side of history? And so it's really important to go through Psalm 90 because Psalm 90 summarizes that whole doctrine by means of the meter. Now, if you've already gone through the Psalm 90 videos, you're sort of aware of that. And so now we're going to go through the correction. This that you're seeing here is a corrected version that you may have already downloaded last year of Psalm 90 in Hebrew Doc. I have changed it. Psalm 90 in Hebrew Doc used to only look like this. Okay? That used to be it. Well, it's now it's extensively added to. And some of the passages here, like I've changed the syllabification. We still got the same total number of verses, but the syllabification within, I was in a hurry when I did it, and I wasn't really looking at it that closely, and now I've gone back and made some corrections. Okay, and we're going to go through that here. But first I want to call your attention to some of the stuff that precedes, because this will help you vet what I'm saying, and it'll also help you find other passages that do the same thing. Because there are got to be at least 100, 150 passages in the Old Testament that do what Moses is doing here. Because Moses is the guy who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, and any of the other prophets who were writing more books of the Bible would have, threaded through what Moses did using the same style. And I mean, I've been able to find it in Psalms, I've been able to find it in Jeremiah, obviously Isaiah, Ezekiel, but, it's going to be everybody. So, just pick a passage that's prophetic about Messiah, and you're probably going to find this same structure. So I just want to reiterate it a little bit. Moses poetically parses the Hebrew syllables into factors of 7. Isaiah, of course, does the same thing. If you've seen those videos, you know how. Okay? It's a paragraph at 7. In other words, there's a whole idea being stated. He might be having, as we saw earlier, you might have a couple of parts of a passage like we saw here, All right, like this part here and this part here is not divisible by 7, so the paragraph isn't over yet. In the Psalm 90 videos, I thought that this ended at 64 syllables, but it's really 63, as you see now. And so there's a whole idea being completed here. And then when he does it again in rapid fire, like he does it in verse 4, which is the same number of syllables as you saw before in the other videos, he's stressing this. Okay, he's stressing the relationship of what went before and the perfection of it, because 7 is the number of perfection in the Bible. Okay, 7 is the number of perfection, the number of promise, especially promise. So you're looking for something divisible by 7. You're counting your syllables, and then at some point within the passage, that what went before is going to be divisible by 7 when you get to a certain number of syllables. Okay? And that's a paragraph, and it's got its own theme. It's also going to have its own actor speaking that theme. Okay? The actor could be the writer, all right? But there's going to be a speaker, because it's dramatic. This is their method of drama, all right? And this method of drama is actually used throughout the Bible, even in the New Testament, which I didn't know until last week, when I found that Paul is doing the same thing in Greek, using the Hebrew metric system, which scholars don't know anything about, because they're looking for they have the wrong idea about what meter ought to be. They're not considering the fact that meter is in the Bible is sourced by the fact that the Jews had to memorize. And so if it's divisible by 7, that's going to be doctrinally meaningful and also easier to remember. Okay, so that's the mistake the scholars have been making for 300 years, and now you can vet this yourself and see how to fix it. Okay, so each paragraph has a theme, each paragraph has an actor speaking, and this is really important. The play of history is on 2 time tracks. And most theologians know this. They'll call it near fulfillment and far fulfillment. That was the common term for it in the 1930s. That you have a near fulfillment, and that is a yearly track to the current generation, all right, and panoramically for the far future. All right, and that's exactly what Moses is doing. He's using the same syllables to tell 2 time stories. The first one is obviously the panoramic, all right, and then the second one is short term, near term. Something's going to prophetically happen near term. All right, the same story, in Isaiah 9, where, it's the prophecy about a virgin shall bear. Okay, well, he had just gotten married, or I guess he had just gotten married, and his wife was going to end up having a kid. Maher Shalal Hashbaz, okay, which is very pregnant in Hebrew, about the spoil. But the point is that was the near fulfillment for Isaiah, and the far fulfillment, of course, is that Christ would be born of a virgin. Okay, there's a lot of debate by the Jews because they want to try and say it's just a young woman, blah blah blah. But it's not really the point that she's a virgin, but it means virgin. Okay, it's translated in Greek as parthenos. So the point that needs to be made here is that there are 2 time tracks. All prophecy in the Bible is on 2 time tracks. And this is really, really important to know, especially when reading Revelation, because Revelation also is on 2 time tracks. One which is trends of history from church forward and for church, explaining Daniel 9:26 more. And then the panoramic is what's going to physically really happen during the trib and the millennium and eternity. Okay? So John's revelation is going to play off Psalm 90. So this is really important to learn. All right. Okay. The next thing is that offstage time is in ellipsis. Moses does that. Isaiah does that. Daniel does that. Paul does that. That was a big shocker for me. I didn't know Paul was going to do it. And when I get to the latter part of my GGS videos, I'm going to show you how Paul does it too. Okay, so you go by the context to find out, well, what years are being left out. If this is a panoramic track to the end of all history, but it's only 350 syllables. Obviously, time is left out. And if you've seen the Psalm 90 videos, you know I was telling you, how do you tell what's left out? Well, he's using 70s to account for a 1050 each. So the 70 is shorthand for saying 1050. So the years that aren't mentioned besides the 70 are the years that are in ellipsis. And he's tracking it by 70 because there's one 70-year voting period per 1050. Okay? Now what I didn't mention much, but I'm going to start mentioning here in greater detail. In the Psalm 90 videos, I talked about how Moses is reconciling to Abraham's too early maturation. I go into a lot of detail here in this page. Again, this is Psalm 90 in Hebrew doc, which you can download. It's already linked in the video descriptions in the Psalm 90 videos. This I covered like quickly. Here, I'm going into it in greater detail. All right? So when you download this, and there's also a PDF version of this same thing called Psalm 90 Parsed, PS 90 Parsed, that's also in the video description. Either one of those, you know, the PDF file for some people is easier to read. They both contain this document, and they contain much more explanation about the 54-year credit from Abraham. All right, as I finally worked out the details that I was missing before. All right, so that's that. And so then the page 4 of this, you know, revised Psalm 90 in Hebrew doc, aka Psalm 90 Parsed PDF, I show the outline. Okay, I didn't know when I first did the Psalm 90 videos, I didn't know that this was the predecessor, the precedent-setting drama format. Okay, for all of the Bible prophecy on it, that all the Bible books after this psalm, you know, and this was written by Moses, so he's the first guy, all of them are talking back to Psalm 90. And they're doing it in a drama format, especially John and Paul. Peter, to a certain extent, is doing that too when he talks about the flood. All right, so you're going to want to read the backstory here about this outline, because I list how, you know, Moses is doing it, and then I have brief paragraphs about some of the important things like the 56, and then David, which, you know, at that time I knew a little bit about this, but I didn't know how the numbers of the priestly courses really fit into this. They're all based on Psalm 90 also. 1 Chronicles 24. The whole design of the priestly courses, you know, why did he do 24? All right, it's based on Psalm 90. All right, so you're going to want to read through that material, okay? And then, of course, we already know Isaiah is doing the same thing, and I go into more detail here. And then Daniel, I've already covered that in some detail, but this is actually better. There's a good summary here. And then what I didn't know at the time I did the videos until, like I said, just a couple of weeks ago, is that Paul is actually aping the same style. So now it becomes more important than normal, than it was before, to go through what Psalm 90 means. All right, if you've seen this before, this is the same structure. 84, 70, 70, 70. 56, that's our pregnant, cliffhanger. The 14 years going to get completed, and we know they won't. And then this is a description as to, you know, what each paragraph meant. And if you've already seen the Psalm 90 videos, this is familiar to you. Okay, but it's better summarized now. And it's always nice to have something on paper you can look at. All right? So here's our familiar, you know, the Hebrew all parsed out. And there are some changes, so you're going to want to compare this to what you saw in the videos and use this instead of the videos. But what I say in the videos is still true. The paragraphs still are the same totals, but there's some changes within the totals. Like this is now 14 and 10. Okay? This summarizes to 63. This, of course, is still 84. This and this are the same. But this is now 133 because Paul's benchmarking it also. Paul's benchmarking the 63, that's how I knew to change it. Paul's benchmarking the 84. Paul's benchmarking the 133, that's how I knew to change it. He benchmarks the 154 and the 175. So I know that my count here, because Paul's benchmarking the same things, I know my count here is okay. Alright? And he's also benchmarking 238, so I feel real good about the parsing that I did through 238. He also benchmarks at 252. So again, the integrity of this is pretty certain. All right. Then he also benchmarks at 315, so I feel really good all the way to 315. Okay. Now, when he gets to 350, he benchmarks that too, but it's in a weird way, and I'll have to cover that when I get to Paul. When I do the Ephesians videos. Okay, so now I'm going to spend time after 15 minutes going through the translation. I made some significant changes versus published Bible translations. What I did is some of the difference is just due to making the meter fit. See, because there's 12 syllables here. So in order to make it fit, I have the prayer of Moses, man of the God, the Lord. Okay, well that isn't really good English, but it is good Hebrew. Okay, because for example here, this is Ha. That means the God. See, Haklohim. Okay, so it's the God. But in English, we don't need to say that and have the same meaning. So the translators will leave this out, and, understandably so. I'm not saying they're wrong. Okay? But in order to make this word be 12 syllables and yet stick to the text without inserting words that brain out infants, I had to stick that word in there. The is really in the text. There it is. So the for God. And when you have a ha in Hebrew, especially in front of Lohim, you really need to render it in capital letters in English. Okay? And then Adonai here doesn't have a ha in front of it. I stick one in, but then that's understandable because even in English it makes good sense. Okay? The Lord, there isn't anybody else. Okay? And so, that's why you got the Hebrew here. You can just look at it and say, oh, I see why Brainout did it that way. Okay? Alright. So the prayer of Moses, the man of the God, the Lord, is verse 1, matching up to the first 12 syllables here. Now, the second thing I need to mention is, see where I got this white space with the little wavy lines? This is wordplay that's going to be used and referenced by the other Bible writers. So I wanted to have a quick way of highlighting it. I don't know if this is going to print out real well on your printout, but it shows up really decently on the screen, so that's what I'm using. And so the parallel in English that the Hebrew represents is also got the wavy lines, but here in English I had to highlight it in yellow, okay, so it would stick out better, so you could see it more quickly. Alright, whereas this was already shaded, so the thing to do is to have it not be yellow or any other color. Okay, so here's your total syllables in the verse, and then here is the verse number and the aggregate number of syllables. See, 24, 48, 63, just like you saw in the older version. Okay, 84. Alright, that's the aggregate, and this is the per verse total. So each verse is total there. Now, I've got this shaded in because this is a paragraph. It becomes divisible by 7 here and here. So I shaded it in here, here and here and here and here to show that these 4 verses fit together. Okay. Now, let's go back through the second 12 syllables here. Alright. Our dwelling you are. Most English translations will have that in there. That's ma'on, but it doesn't really just mean dwelling. It means refuge. It means the place where you go for protection. It means the place where you feel at home, which is the root meaning in dwelling. But it's really talking about, where you're protected, you're relaxed, you don't have to be on your guard. Okay? The Lord is our refuge and our strength. And ma'on conveys all that in Hebrew. Alright, so dwelling is okay, but it's really not enough. And I didn't have enough room, in 12 syllables to stick in all the meaning of ma'on here. See, here's ma'on. Alright? Now, generation is actually an idiom that we're translating, and that's close to the way the Bible's translated too, for every generation. It's really from generation to generation. Alright, but I didn't have enough syllables to say that, see? Bador, wa'or. Wador. Bador, wador. Okay, that really would be better translated from generation to generation, especially because it's going to fit ma'olam adolam down here, from forever to forever. But I didn't have enough syllables in English. I couldn't do that. Generation takes up too many syllables. All right. So that's why I translated it that way, for every generation. It's not as dramatic as it is in the real Hebrew. And, your Bibles will probably say from generation to generation, and they're right to say that. I just didn't have the syllables, okay? Now, Isaiah will be playing on this door business of generation in Isaiah 53:8, and that's really important. And, of course, he plays on the dwelling, the refuge, really poignantly, when he talks about panim emenu, in Isaiah 53:3. Okay, this will be poignantly covering how we turn away from Him who is our refuge. It's really it makes you cry, that verse. Okay, our next stop is right here, Tevel. Tevel literally means streams, like streams of water in Hebrew. And see, these are little footnotes where I talk about some of what I'm saying to you. See, it means streams. But it doesn't just mean a stream of water. It means streams of people, of civilization, or time. The Hebrew is always very multi-level. And so you're to understand that when this word here, tevel, is used, it's talking about more than just people. Okay, it's usually translated inhabitants or the world in the English Bibles, but it means more than that, and I didn't have enough syllables to write down all that it meant, so I restricted it kind of like the translators do, to occupants. Alright? They land as earth, because this is eretz, alright? But it's and that's okay to maybe translate it that way, because it isn't listed ha'eretz. Ha'eretz is used to distinguish Israel usually. But this is like land and stream. But it's land and stream of people. It's the economy of speech. So that's why I just used occupants. I'm not really happy with that translation, but if unless you can come up with a better one, I don't know what else to use. It fits the meter. See, before mountains were born, or you birthed land and occupants, from forever to forever. You, God, okay, from forever is our friendly ma'olam adolam right here. Alright. Now, one of the faults in English Bibles is that what they do is they tame down exclamatory sentences. Not all English translators do that. This is ata, el. It's shouted. It's excitement. There's no verb there. Okay? And so it should be translated, you, God. That's a better translation than what you find in English Bibles. Okay? So that's why I did that. And it fits. Before mountains were born, or you birthed the land and occupants, that's 14 syllables. From forever to forever, you, God, that's 10 syllables. You see? That's why I'm doing it this way. And, it lends itself to pretty easy English verse translation. English poetic translation. And, the NASB translators, I didn't check the other versions, but the NASB translators were kind of trying to match the syllables when they translated it. Okay? Maybe the other versions of English translation tried to do it too, but definitely the NASB translator of this passage was trying to match the meter, but I don't think maybe he was in a hurry, or, he just couldn't figure out what words to use. Okay? So, be aware that they know that there was something going on here, and they were trying to match it. Alright, so then we come to verse 3, and this is kind of a no-brainer, but I want to call your attention to the wordplay. Teshuv, teshev, teshiv, I'm not saying it right, and shuvu. That's the same verb. Okay? Return. Now, it's got wordplay in that man comes from dust and he goes back to dust. But it's also got this wordplay that Moses is going to develop about turning away from God or turning to God. Turning to God, of course, is return. But turning away is paninu in Hebrew. And so it's like, are you returning to your vomit, or are you returning to God? And in any event, at the end, you return to God. Now, there was just no way I could translate all that. No, it's just something you have to notice. So that's why I just left it at, you turn man back into dust, which is pretty close to what you'll see in your English Bibles anyway. Okay, but you just know that this is a really important verb in Hebrew. Returning of Christ, returning to the millennium, returning of God, returning to the Jews, okay, returning to Israel, return. It's almost the most important verb in Judaism. Okay. Alright, then we get here, and again, this is pretty close to what you're used to seeing. I left out, because it is left out. The English translators like to slow it down, or they make it more boring. They think that's more majestic or something. And I don't believe in that. Just give me the words the way God used them. Alright? The meaning is a little bit different in terms of the flavor. Alright? For example, 1,000 years to your eyes, your is stressed in the Hebrew right here. Okay? Kirlef, shanim, ba'enika. It's stressed. Okay, so I capitalized it. Okay, and then obviously, kayom, the day, past. Etmol. Okay, so like yesterday, past. That's pretty straightforward. But this was a little more. They weren't, either they knew it and they felt they couldn't translate it this way, or they were not aware of, not thinking about the wordplay here. This is Yever. This is where Hebrew comes from, the Passover people. Ever, Ivrit, the whole thing means to pass over the deadline. They passed through the Sea of Reeds, okay? They passed through the dry shod, passing through, passing over. And it's also got this connotation of overflow, okay? God's anger at Egypt, okay? Passing over, however, Goshen. Okay? It's got all of those ideas of passing over, passing through, flooding through, going through dry shod, going beyond the boundary. All those ideas are in Erev. And since that's the meaning of Hebrew, it's just too good to pass up, if you'll excuse the pun. Alright? So, that's why I didn't pass it up. Now, our next little stop here is, okay, you flood them. I've seen Bible translations use that. That's the Ram-Tam here. And, of course, that's a very pregnant reference to the flood, which I covered before. Okay. But this one here I didn't cover. That's Shineh. Shineh and where is it? Shanim. Shana. Shineh. Shana. Shineh means to sleep, or it's the noun for sleep. Okay. So your years are asleep. It sounds just like Shana. You have years and you're asleep. That's stressing how short the Shana are. okay? But it's also like, what's the point of them? Because what years we are alive, we're sleeping, okay? We're flooded with, all of our cares and worries and concerns, and none of it has anything to do with God, but we pretend it does, and we're actually sleepwalking. Okay, he's making a play on that, and that's Shana, Shana, all right, for years. So years and sleep is the word play, the sound play being made. Okay, and then we have another sound play, Yachaluf. Yachluf. Yachluf. Well, that's a play on Aleph. Galef. Yaluf. Yachluf. Yalef. Yachluf. In other words, see how fast it is? Elef. Lef. Just quick. Yachluf. You're Elef, but you're Yachluf. You're up and down. 1,000 years doesn't mean nothing. Okay? That's the point. And then I had, that's a kind of passing on. See, this is like, you're, how do I want to call it? You're here and gone. Okay? Well, passing over and passing on is what he's playing on here. See, if you pass over to God, then he passes over you in judgment. And then when you pass on, even though you sleep, you're returning to him. See all that wealth of wordplay? And frankly, when you see other Bible verses, other writers of Scripture are going to be playing on these very same words, okay? Like John, this is Tevel here, is literally means streams, and especially streams of water. Well, the sea of glass in Revelation 4, and the devil put his feet on the sea of people. Because that's what it means here. Tevel, sea of people. Okay, well, John's playing on that in Revelation 4 and Revelation 13. And at other places, too. I mean, the whole concept of sea in the Bible is politics and sea of nations. Moving back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, just like the ocean. Never really going anywhere. Okay, passing over, sleeping, and passing on. Question is, passing on to where? All right, so I think I stopped by, okay, let's go back here and read it. You turn man back into dust and say, return, sons of Adam. 1,000 years to your eyes are like yesterday, past. Like a passing over the night watch. You're walking back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on the turret or wherever it is your night watch is occupied on the hill. And walking back, and then the night watch is over, and that's it. Okay? You flood them. Pregnant reference to the flood, surround them. That's just a straightforward translation. They will soon sleep. The word soon is not in the text, but it's in the meaning, and I needed it to fill out the number of syllables so I could reach 7. Okay? In the morning, like grass, they will pass on. Okay? And that's Yachluf. Alright? There's Baboker. Ki Chatz Yir. Yeah, like grass. Okay? Even if it's 1,000 years, it's still like grass. And then what happens at the end? They get flooded by God. Yeah, because this is the passage about the flood that's going to come, because they're not listening, because they're asleep. They don't care about God. So they're going to pass on by being flooded over. They're going to be passed over, and then Noah will pass over them. See, because they're drowning. It's pretty graphic, huh? Okay, so now we get to verse 6, and this is pretty straightforward. By morning he sprouts. Yatit here is what I'm using to translate sprouts, but it means, of course, sprout and splendor. Alright, I couldn't put all that word in there, and I only had one syllable available, so I used sprouts instead of splendor. Okay, and then here's our friend again. He repeats this a lot. Yachluf, chaluf, hachaluf, haluf. See, you no sooner say it, then it's like over. Okay? And then here's our friendly. This is really important. Yeah. Molel. Molel means circumcised. In fact, that's in modern Yiddish today. The guy who does the circumcision is called a molel. Okay? The translators just covered that up, okay? I'm sorry. They think they translate it like declined. I think that's the NASB translation. It's ridiculous. Circumcised. That's the only meaning it's got. They're just playing political football, and they don't want to admit that this means circumcised. Moses is playing a little word game here. Are you going to be circumcised by God, or are you going to circumcise yourself? Yeah, well, if you circumcise yourself, you become a foreskin dried up. That's Numbers 11:6. Yabesh. It's the same word as used in Numbers 11:6. You become a dried up prune full of all kinds of complaints against God because you circumcised yourself. And then what happens to the foreskin? It dries up the minute you take it off. Okay, very graphic. Okay, now we have some more wordplay. Ba peka. I translated that as rage because I only had one syllable to work with. It's usually translated anger, and that's fine. I just had only one syllable, so I had to use rage. Okay? When it says, see, ki kalnu, okay, that means we end, but it means life, and I needed the extra syllable, so here it goes. Okay? Because otherwise the sense of it, so we end what? And life. With your rage. They sometimes say in your anger, and that's okay too, but with is actually better. A better translation. Hebrew ba, preposition, means in with, in association with. Sometimes it means because of, or with reference to. Okay, but with is a really good translation here because there's a wordplay going on here by Moses about whose rage it really is. In other words, why is it God's rage? Because we're enraged at God. See, because, how do I want to say this? We end with rage at you, as well as we end with your own rage. See, there's enough, how do you want to call it? There's enough ambiguity there that you could have it be God's rage, which of course, apeka would mean, but it also could be rage at you. You see? So this is really, when we say end with your rage, that's really not, that's why I want to use with. We end with your rage. That means we have rage ourselves. Now, if you can come up with a better translation, I'm all ears. All right? Now, another thing that in the last clause, what I'm translating as hot wrath is ha ma teka. And that's hema, okay? Hamateka. I don't remember if it's NIV or NASB or somebody is translating that we are consumed by your wrath. Okay? That's not really what it says. It's saying that the wrath itself is hot. It's not talking about whether it consumes anybody. I mean, that's in the idea, and you can think about it that way. But again, Moses is picking the fact that we're the ones who are angry. Okay? So if you want to talk about it as hot wrath consuming, who's really doing the consuming? It's us. And again, that's the positioning of the word. Okay? Again, there's this sort of ambiguity about whether the ka at the end is God as the object or God as the subject. Okay? There's a certain duality about that. And especially given the placement of this. So, and then especially when you got this at the end. Okay? Ni, ba, ha, le, nu. Bachal, no. Okay? Bachalen, Bachal, no. I don't know how you want to pronounce that. Bachal, no. It's Bahal is the verb. And Bahal really means to be apoplectic or consternated. It does not mean to be dismayed. It does not mean to be terrified or afraid. It really doesn't have that kind of. It means that something hits you suddenly, and you are shocked, surprised, angry. See, angry. The primary emotion in consternation is anger, and you become confused and upset as a result. In other words, you're expecting, and this is the goal of this thing, you're expecting God to be nice to you. Yeah, but you're not. You're angry at Him. See, you want God to give you something. God owes me, God owes me, God owes me, God owes me. That's what the works people are all about. If I do works, then God will reward me. Yeah. Yeah, okay. You will be rewarded with the same rage with which you rewarded God. And as a result, they're consternated. They're all ticked off. They're ticked off. All right? And of course, they are suffering. But there's this duality of what's consuming them. I mean, the suffering that they get from God is really a mirroring of their own attitude. Okay? So that's why I've translated it this way. All right, now we come to 41 minutes. I think I'll stop there and go into the next section.